big a deal as Google finally trying to challenge Samsung and OnePlus and Huawei at the high end might be, the bigger deal is that they are using a brand new processor, technically a SoC, system on a chip, that's called Tensor. Tensor is the brand that Google uses for some of its AI hardware, so it's Tensor, not like it's more tense. So what Google has done is they've taken the Tensor Processing Units, the TPUs that they use in their machine learning data centers, and they've made a mobile version of that that goes into the Pixel 6. Now, you probably know the basics of what goes into a phone's core specs. There's the CPU, the GPU, the RAM, and then maybe there are some like co-processors on the side to handle specific tasks like image processing or security. With Tensor, Google is saying that it's going to do a flagship level job on all of that core CPU stuff, but that the TPU part of it is also going to be essential to the entire pipeline. It's going to be part of the main flow of how the phone works. Sort of like how Apple added the neural engine to its A-series chips. Google doesn't want AI to just be a little faster on the side. It wants to make it as essential as all of those other standard phone parts. Okay, but what does that mean? Well, Google did show me a few demos. In one, there was a photo of a kid whose face was super blurry because the kid was moving and flailing around because that's what kids do. But the TPU was able to fix it so the kid's face wasn't blurry. What Google says happened here is the main camera did the usual thing that Google's, cameras have always done. It took a bunch of photos, gathered lots of image data, but that the ultra-wide sensor on the Pixel 6 does something new. It is there just to get a super fast shot to minimize blur. And so with this new Tensor Processing Unit, what they can do without making you wait for it is its machine learning sees that there is a face there and that we hate blurry faces. So it grabbed that data from the ultra wide, combined it with the regular data that Google's always grabbed, combined them, and you have a sharp photo.
So we should also see, obviously, Android 12 probably make its official debut, the release on the new Pixel 6. So there's a lot in Android 12. Google, I think, made this a huge update. Other things, other small bits about the Pixel 6 and 6 Pro. In-display fingerprint reader, which will be a nice addition to the phones. High refresh rates. We don't know if it'll be 120 or stay at 90, but higher than 60 at least. And there's been some debate between sort of OnLeaks and John Prosser if there's going to be a chin on the Pixel 6. And again, having actually seen the physical pictures of the 6 and 6 Pro, I went back and looked. Those did not have a chin. So we should have a pretty close to sort of full glass to glass, and then there'll be a hole punch in the middle for the front-facing camera. All right, so on the software side, obviously Android 12 is going to be there. There's a bunch of awesome things coming to Android 12. This is a really big feature update for Google. They tend to alternate years where it's more of bug fixes and then sort of big giant features. But aside from UI overhaul, there's a lot here. So double tap on the back. That's something that Apple has sort of with accessibility, where you can double tap the back and you can make things happen. You can launch apps, take screenshots, notifications, whatever you want to do. It's like having another button on the phone that you can customize. I love it. It did trigger a ton by accident on Apple, so I had to turn it off. Hopefully Google fixes those issues. Like I just hold the phone, it would take a screenshot. But I imagine there's been some time that has passed and Google will not have those issues. Another thing I'm pretty pumped about for Android 12 though, is a new widget. It's a conversations widget, which sounds not that exciting, but hear me out. It actually will tap into really any ongoing message from different messaging applications, showing you the latest message in the chat, which is awesome. So you can have one widget for all of your chats and you can reply directly from that widget. So claps to that. Google Assistant also can now launch the power menu. It can't fully turn off your phone with your voice, but it can launch it so you can actually have it pull up and then you can tap whatever you want. So Material You design, aside from having, I think, a ridiculous name, does look awesome. A fully revamped UI experience tailored to kind of your tastes. It'll automatically pick a color palette adapting to your wallpaper. It's really just more uniquely designed for you with interactive widgets, animations throughout the whole operating system. It looks really good. It's a visual change for Google. There's more emphasis on privacy as well in the background. And I think if you've been waiting to jump in to Android and maybe you're with Samsung or other manufacturers that are perhaps slower with updates, you might want to consider the Pixel 6 to at least know you're going to get the latest software from Google.
But the one thing I want to talk about that's across both of these phones is the new custom designed silicon that will be in both of them called Google Tensor. So this was rumored for a little bit. Pixel phones for years have been using a variety of Snapdragon chips from Qualcomm, whatever's available, just like every other high-end Android phone. But it was rumored that brewing in the background was this Whitechapel project of Google designing their own silicon to eventually go into the Pixel phone. This has turned out to be true. So there's a couple different benefits to this, and it's not even a new idea completely. Obviously Apple designs all the chips in their iPhones, but also Huawei makes the Kirin chips, and Samsung makes Exynos chips. This is a thing that's been happening. And there's even been little bits of custom silicon inside Pixel phones before already. They had a custom image signal processor called the Pixel Visual Core and then Pixel Neural Core, and also the Titan M security chip. But this entire chip, this whole phone being powered by just a Tensor chip, well, that's a big deal. I think it's particularly important for the Pixel line specifically because of how much Google does with software and that optimization process. And I think we're going to see a lot of big changes here. So let's start with the biggest, I think most obvious place, which is in their cameras. So we all know by now that Pixels have had really good photo quality specifically for a couple years now. And that's because of their awesome software and computational photography. But the video quality has always just been meh, like nothing special, pretty average from the Pixel. And so what Google showed me on Pixel 6 was a comparison with the Pixel 6 and the iPhone 12 and the Pixel 5. And of course, this is a very, handcrafted, tailored comparison to show the best thing that they could do, but they're basically taking all those computational photography chops and applying them to video because Tensor enables that now. And it was really impressive what I was able to see. We'll see much more hands-on demos, of course, I'm sure very soon, but that's exciting. That's the HDR, that's the noise reduction, the stabilization, all of that smarts in video now too. Also, Pixel cameras have always been great, but since Pixel 2, they've basically been using the same kind of small at this point sensor because they've got it so dialed with their algorithms. They can of course improve the glass and of course the iris opening every year, but generally it's been the same sensor, and I suspect they were reluctant to change it because why move to some huge new 50 megapixel sensor if you don't have the computational photography chops to back it up? So they've just been sticking with the same sensor. But this year with Pixel 6, it is all new sensors, big new sensors. And I'm really curious to see what kind of results we're going to get with Tensor and the image processing on these big new sensors.
So the biggest change by far is the fact that a Pixel 6 doesn't come with a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor anymore, but instead it comes with Google's own chip. I talked about this before, a chip that was codenamed Whitechapel. But now we know the actual name of it, which is Tensor. First off, the reason why this is called Tensor is because it actually matches Google's homemade Tensor Processing Unit, or TPU, that they use in their data centers. The Tensor Processing Unit is essentially just an accelerator rather than a full-on CPU. So it is a board that you connect to your computer that can accelerate certain applications. Think of this as Apple's afterburner card for the Mac Pro, which can seriously speed up ProRes RAW decoding, as that was what it was designed for. The Tensor Processing Unit is just like that, but created to speed up machine learning and AI tasks instead. And the reason why Google named the Pixel 6 chip Tensor is because just like Google's Tensor Processing Unit, it too was designed to massively speed up AI and machine learning tasks. They've customized it to make use of Google's existing computational photography models, which does actually enable a few new features. For example, when you take a photo with the main module, the ultra-wide module will capture a shot as well, and then combine those two photos to reduce blur and add more detail into the shot. But that's not all. When you're shooting video, the Pixel 6 will now apply the same image processing that they normally applied to photos, which is pretty insane because that means that the image processing would now process 30 photos every single second. Leader from The Verge said that HDR video on the Pixel 6 looked better than even on the iPhone 12 Pro Max from his quick hands-on look. On top of this, thanks to the new Tensor SoC, the Pixel 6 can now translate audio in real time, even without an internet connection, which is Very impressive. And Google said that there are no more co-processors anymore, no Pixel Visual Core or Neural Core, as everything is now built into this new Tensor chip, including a separate controller for handling the always-on display and other low-level processes in order to save on battery life. Oh, and there's also a new security chip inside the Tensor SoC, the Titan M2 chip, which Google claims makes the Pixel 6 the most secure phone in the world.